everybody, Sandre here, and today I'm gonna make a video that I actually don't take any pleasure in making. You see, Sargon, who is someone I at least want to believe I have a friendly relationship with, has made a number of, there's no nice way of saying this, but simply flabbergasting statements. Absolutely moronic statements. Incredibly fallacious and ignorant statements. One of which is this.
In his 1927 book Liberalism, Mises applauded Benito Mussolini's fascist party and similar movements aimed at the establishment of dictatorships across Europe, saying that they had for the moment saved European civilization, a merit that would live on eternally in history. I haven't read the book Liberalism, so I don't know the context of what he said there. However, Mises was basically an ANCAP, so I'm going to assume that this author is once again misrepresenting the people he's talking about. In the 1970s, Hayek defended his decision to advise Chilean butcher Augusto Pinochet. A friend of mine called Academic Agent had researched Pinochet and found that at most he'd probably killed about 400 communists. So I imagine he's roughly in the same ballpark as Hillary Clinton. I'm joking. But his opinion that he would prefer a liberal dictator to a democratic government lacking liberalism, in the classical sense, mind you. Well, obviously. And now we can compare Chile to Venezuela, and we can see that the liberal dictatorship of Pinochet is far superior to the socialist dictatorship of Maduro. But Hayek's point...
Yes. Apparently Pinochet only killed 400 commies or so. I can't believe that I'm gonna have to school Sargon in basic history. But I guess if no one else is gonna do it, it's gonna have to be me. Wait, what's that? Okay, I'm getting the word that apparently Sargon has made another stupid statement not much later. Okay, let's see what that statement is.
She cites the example of Dave Rubin hosting Stefan Molyneux, who openly promotes scientific racism and advocates for the men's rights movement. Okay, Stefan Molyneux is not a racist. He promotes scientific data. He doesn't say why the data is that way. There is evidence one way and another, and it's a long-running scientific question. He is not making categoric statements on this.
Looking at human beings as one species is not biologically valid. We are a variety of subspecies, politically, ethnically sometimes, definitely in terms of gender, in terms of IQ, in terms of culture. These produce physical brain differences that are very hard to remediate when you get older. And so we are a cluster of genetics all fighting to reproduce their own particular genetics.
Okay, Stefan Molyneux is not a racist. He promotes scientific data. He doesn't say why the data is that way. There is evidence one way and another, and it's a long-running scientific question. He is not making categoric statements on this.
They're going to fail. These immigrants are going to fail. And they're not just going to fail a little bit. They're going to fail hard.
Okay, Stefan Molyneux is not a racist. He promotes scientific data. He doesn't say why the data is that way. There is evidence one way and another, and it's a long-running scientific question. He is not making categoric statements on this.
You are importing a radicalized low IQ population into a high IQ society, and capitalism pays for intelligence. That's what it does. You get paid for your intelligence. And so you are importing a huge bunch of people into Europe who are going to fail. They're not staying on welfare because they're lazy. They're not. That's like saying somebody with an IQ of 80 doesn't apply to graduate school because they're lazy. No. They're doing what is economically the best option for them. Again, in general, right?
Will you all excuse me for a moment? Anyway, going back to his statements regarding Pinochet. Well, where will I begin? How about with this? Allende was elected to be Chile's president for 6 years ahead as the candidate for the party Unidad Popular in the election of 1970. He got 36.2% of the votes, against 34.9% for the former president and the conservative candidate Jorge Alessandri, and 27.8% for the Christian Democrat Radomiro Tomic. The National Congress approved of Allende as president, tallying the votes of 154 and 35 against on the 24th of October. According to the then Chilean constitution, Congress was meant to choose one of these candidates with the most votes to be the new president. Allende was chosen, and he took over the role of president on the 3rd of November 1970. Since the US had for a long time been trying to prevent Allende from getting into the post of president, him being elected democratically was celebrated worldwide as a great victory of socialism. There's evidence of American involvement in the election. Several American companies like ITT Corporation, Anaconda, and Kennecott owned lands and mineral rights in Chile. The Nixon administration feared that these companies would be nationalized under Allende. Under Nixon's presidency,
well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
They tried to prevent Allende from winning in the election of 1970, and one of the tactics was to finance the opposition parties that were allied with Jorge Alessandri. They also provided support to strikes within the mining and transport sectors. ITT Corporation gave at least $35,000 in campaign admission to Jorge Alessandri, while the CIA financed him both through ITT and other channels. The CIA also tried to ruin Allende's reputation by claiming that his campaign had gotten $35,000 from Cuba. On the 22nd of October, General René Schneider was shot and severely injured at a kidnapping attempt led by a group which in turn was led by General Roberto Vial, who planned a coup against Allende. Schneider departed 3 days later at a hospital. The plan of the kidnapping had gotten support by CIA. However, the operation most likely was cancelled. General Schneider was a known defender of the so-called constitutional doctrine, which meant that the army's role was to protect the country's sovereignty and to not get involved in politics. On the 26th of October, the departing president Eduardo Frei Montalva chose to make Carlos Prats the new commander-in-chief. The murder of Schneider awoken a sense of distaste in Chile, and it temporarily made the military not intervene against Allende. When Allende won the presidency in Chile in 1970, Chile had great economic difficulties. There was a slow growth of the economy, there was a lot of inflation, and a lot of economic inequality. Allende wanted to focus on breaking the centralization of the economic power, and therefore he focused on political reforms that, among other things, sought to nationalize parts of the private industry. Due to this, there was a great conflict about how and when the Earth's ownership would be redistributed from the great owners of land, and whether or not the great finds of copper in Chile would be nationalized as well. Under Allende's first year as president, there were great economic improvements. The GDP increased with 8.6%, inflation dropped from 34.9% to 22.1%, and industrial output increased with 12%. However, Allende's socialist reforms awoke a lot of great resistance. Most of this resistance was in the upper class of Chilean society, as well as in the US, who placed diplomatic, economic, and secret pressures on the government. In October of 1972, there was the first of what would be many confrontations, led by historically privileged groups in the Chilean society. These confrontations got open support by the United States President Richard Nixon.
Because overzealous people in campaigns do things that are wrong. What really hurts is if you try to cover it up.
A truck driver strike was supported and financed by the CIA with $2 million within the so-called September Plan, which was started on the 9th of October 1972. Confederación Nacional del Transporte started the unlimited strike, which involved 165 truck driver unions with 40,000 members and 56,000 vehicles, which grinded the country to a stop. Before we get to the military coup of 1973, we will now talk about Pinochet. Augusto José Ramón Pinochet Ugarte, more known as Augusto Pinochet, was born on the 25th of November in 1915 in Valparaiso, Chile, and he died on the 10th of December 2006 in Santiago, Chile. He was a Chilean general, politician, and dictator. He took the power in Chile through a military coup in 1973. Pinochet was made army chief in 1970 by Salvador Allende, after his predecessor René Schneider's death. In August of 1973, Chile was shook by a constitutional crisis where the opposition dominated deputy chamber, accused the government for, among other things, breaking the constitution when Allende refused to sign under a petition which would have made it illegal to continue the nationalizations that were happening. On the 9th of September, Senate managed to pass through a declaration of mistrust against Allende, but as he refused to step down, Senate asked the military to intervene. On the 11th of September, the military coup was started, with coordinated actions all around the nation, and it culminated in the bombardment of the presidential palace, through which Salvador Allende, via radio, broadcasted one last speech.
La Fuerza Aérea ha bombardeado las torres de Radio Portales y Radio Corporación. Mis palabras no tienen amargura sino decepción, y serán ellas el castigo moral para los que han traicionado el juramento que hicieron. Soldados de Chile, comandantes en jefe, titulares, y el almirante Merino que se ha autodesignado, más el señor Mendoza, general rastrero, que solo ayer manifestara su fidelidad y lealtad al gobierno, también será nominado director general del Carabineros. Ante estos hechos, solo me cabe decirle a los trabajadores, yo no voy a renunciar. Colocado en un tránsito histórico, pagaré con mi vida la lealtad del pueblo. Y les digo que tengo la certeza que la semilla que entregáramos a la conciencia digna de miles y miles de chilenos no podrá ser cegada definitivamente. Tienen la fuerza, podrán avasallarnos, pero no se detienen los procesos sociales ni con el crimen ni con la fuerza. La historia es nuestra y la hacen los pueblos. Trabajadores de mi patria, quiero agradecerles la lealtad que siempre tuvieron, la confianza que depositaron en un hombre que solo fue intérprete de grandes anhelos de justicia, que empeñó su palabra de que respetaría la Constitución y la ley, y así lo hizo. En este momento les Definitivo, el último en que yo pueda dirigirme a ustedes. Quiero que aprovechen la lección. El capital foráneo, el imperialismo, unido a la reacción, creó el clima para que las Fuerzas Armadas rompieran su tradición.
An autopsy in 2011 showed that Allende committed suicide with his AK-47. It should be noted that the coup itself was actually an illegal act. In 1999, the Clinton administration decided to publicize documents that had been kept secret. According to a CIA report from 2000, the CIA had not encouraged a coup, but they were aware that a coup was planned and had contact with a couple of conspirators. Since the CIA had not prevented the coup, and on top of this also had tried to start another coup in 1970, it seems like they ignored the event. And after the illegal coup of 1973, the CIA and the US government continued to support the undemocratic military junta. Directly after the coup, a military junta was started. This was coordinated by Augusto Pinochet for the army, Gustavo Ley for the Air Force, Jose Toribio Merino for the Navy, and Cesar Mendoza for the police. Since Pinochet was chief for the oldest branch of defense, he became the junta's leader. The junta dissolved the National Congress, through which they also made the Constitution irrelevant. And so the junta took over both executive and lawmaking power. Censorship and curfews were immediately put in after the coup. Originally, the idea was that the power would circulate between the junta members, but Pinochet's position became permanent. On the 27th of June, 1974, he declared himself Jefe Supremo de la Nación, and on the 17th of December the same year, he formally took over the role of president. Shortly thereafter, political persecutions and the unexplained disappearances of members of the left opposition started to take hold. Already in October of 1973, there was an organized death patrol, the so-called Caravan of Death, Caravana de la Muerte, which executed people all around Chile who had been abducted by the military. Months after the coup, all the persecutions were intensified and thousands of suspects mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Pinochet combined political dictatorship with a market economic policy. He promoted a capitalist economic system, and he wanted to undo as much of the nationalizations that had been done under Allende to the greatest extent possible. Milton Friedman himself declared that what was happening in Chile, such as the illegal coup, was something wonderful. And he fully supported the dictatorship of Pinochet. Pinochet's struggle against communism made him a very close ally to the US, which also actively promoted his rule. Under Pinochet, Chile also supported Great Britain during the Falklands Island War of 1982. Partially this was done with intelligence given to the UK. Pinochet's Chile participated among the other military dictatorships in Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, and Argentina in Operation Condor. The cooperation, which was formed in Chile on Pinochet's 60th birthday, 25th of November 1975, meant that they were now able to persecute political dissidents outside of their home nations. In 1982, the former Christian Democrat president Eduardo Frei Montalva had originally supported the military coup against Allende, but had later become a resistant opponent of the junta, died. There were accusations that were directed towards the secret police that they had poisoned him right before a medical operation. In a public referendum of 1988, the Chileans rejected Pinochet, and democratic elections with several candidates was later arranged. On the 11th of March 1990, 17 years of military dictatorship came to an end, as Pinochet stepped down, and instead, the democratically elected Patricio Aylwin became president. Pinochet had himself declared the election, but he had overstated his own popularity. After having lost the presidential post, he still kept the position of army chief, which meant continued great political influence. In 1998, Augusto Pinochet finally left the position of army chief, but he did instead keep a post as a lifetime senator and was therefore continuously immune against prosecution. According to plenty of calculations, such as the Rettig-Rapporten, Pinochet's presidency cost at least 3,000 people's lives. The independent government Wallich-Rapport from 2004 came to the conclusion that 30,000 people had been affected, such as through murder, torture, or political imprisonment. A large amount of left supporters, union activists, and critics of the regime. But others who had simply been at the wrong place at the wrong time were also imprisoned, tortured, and disappeared without a trace. In later years, they have discovered mass graves whose victims can be traced back to the years of the dictatorship. In 2003, many highly positioned military men who had partook in the management testified that many victims had simply been flown out over the Pacific and thrown into the sea to erase any trace of murder. Like I said before, in 1999, the Clinton administration decided to publicize documents that had been kept secret. And since then, thousands more documents have been released by several authorities in the US. So, no, Sargon, Pinochet did not just kill 400 communists or so. In fact, over 30,000 people have been greatly affected by his regime. But here's the thing, Sargon. Even if he had only killed 400 communists, how the fuck can you in any way make light of that and defend it? Seriously, Sargon, what the fuck is wrong with you? Lately, you have made a number of bad public statements that show that you're either incredibly ignorant of basic history or you simply don't care. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I can't tell which one it is anymore. I genuinely can't. And so I'm making one last appeal to you, to whatever sense you may have left. Please think about the path you're heading down, because it's not pretty, and it will leave you a much worse human being if you choose to continue this trek.